Surprise! No sermon tonight. Just kidding. Don't get your hopes up. Surprise. Some people hate it, some people love them. I think if we took a poll, we might find we were pretty evenly divided on that. Surprises come in all shapes and sizes. Like when you find you get a refund from the government on your income tax. That'll be a very rare surprise this year, we think. Or, as the old saying says, behind every successful man stands a very surprised woman. Surprise. But surprises can sometimes simply be puzzling. And we must say that the women who went to the tomb on that first Easter morning must have been very, very surprised in a puzzled way at first. First of all, they go and they expect that the stone will be blocking their way in to do the customary anointings, and instead they find it rolled back. Surprise. And then when they go in, they find not the body of Jesus of Nazareth, but it says a young man sitting to the right of where the body had lain. Surprise. Who is this young man? You know, I was surprised. It took me many years before I realized that in the Gospel of St. Mark, there is not an angel there. It says a young man. In the other Gospel accounts of the resurrection, it says an angel told them that he is risen, he is not here. So who is this surprising young man dressed in white to the right of the place where the body of Jesus had been laid? It does say it was a young man. And since the beginning of the church, the fathers of the church, the theologians, the saints, tried to figure out who this was. There's no comment about it. It doesn't give you a name. There's no follow-up. He just brings that message that says, do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, but don't be surprised. He's not here. He has been raised. Go and tell his disciples and Peter that he'll see them in Galilee, way up north, far, far from this place where he has died. So who is this young man? When we look at the Gospel of St. Mark, we see that there are three such unidentified young men in the Gospel of St. Mark. And the tradition among many of the fathers was that they are one and the same person who recurs anonymously, surprisingly, and without any further mention. If we look at them, if we look at the recurrence of that young man, and if we imagine that it is the same young man, I think we can learn something about our own spiritual trajectory. And perhaps something that our newly baptized, confirmed, and First Communion candidates can identify with as well. The first young man comes up in the 10th chapter of St. Mark. A rich young man comes to Jesus, well-dressed, well-educated. He knows his Torah. He's a good, devout Jewish fellow. And he says, Master, what can I do to be more perfect? And Jesus, it says, looked at him with love. He recognized the goodness of this young man. And he says, if you want to be perfect, go and sell what you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. And it says, that young man went away sad, because he had many possessions. Probably not just his beautiful clothes and his physical possessions, but his youth, his knowledge, his learning about his Jewish religion, everything. He was rich in so many ways. He couldn't give it up. even though he was drawn to the message of the kingdom that Jesus gave. And it says, he went away sad. Another anonymous, unnamed young man comes forward in the 14th chapter of St. Mark Gospel. In the Garden of Gethsemane, it says that when Judas came and betrayed Jesus with a kiss, and the soldiers went to take him, that among the followers of Jesus was this young man, and they tried to grab him too, but he was only wearing a white linen cloth, and when they took it off him, he ran away from the crowd, naked, afraid to be caught. That young man was there, and he ran away unclad. The fathers of the church say that young man was the rich young man. That indeed, after he left Jesus sad, that he reconsidered, and he became a follower of Christ. And he did give away all his fine clothes and wore the simplest of garments. And he followed Jesus that night to the Mount of Olives. But his conviction was not firm. And it says that he ran away, frightened, when the forces of the Romans tried to capture him as well. He had changed his rich garments for a mere linen sheet because he was partially converted to the Lord. Conversion takes time. The development of faith takes growth. And none of us are where we want to be finally. Faith is never a finished product. And for that rich young man, his faith got him so far, but no further, not far enough. That young man who once went away from Jesus sad, now runs away unclad, you might say, stripped by the powers of this world. So it is that our faith at times also isn't everything it should be. It can be also stripped away, perhaps by our own fears, most often by our own fears, by our own doubts and insecurities, sometimes by enemies of Christ, or even by a hostile culture, whether that happens to be in far-off places in the world, such as in Kenya or Pakistan, whether in parts of our own country, even in the heartland, in Indiana or Arkansas, in Hollywood or in television, perhaps in our own backyards or families. If our faith is as flimsy as that young man's linen sheet, it will be able to be whisked away. Faith that is merely cultural or tribal is easily destroyed or transformed into rationalism or superstition. Faith requires us to grow. It requires study so that we have a framework to believe. It requires acts of service so that it may be reinforced. Remember, Jesus told the young man, give away what you have to those in need. And above all, faith requires prayer. If there's anything that we need to learn in our life, it is the importance of praying each and every day. Not only the formal prayers we know, which give us such consolation, the Our Father, the Rosary, the Hail Mary, the prayers of the Psalms, but informal prayer, the prayer of the heart that says, Jesus, help me. Sometimes people come to me and say, Father, I can't pray, I get so distracted. All I can do sometimes is just throw up my hands and say, Jesus, help me. I say, listen, you're doing a better prayer than I am. Jesus, help me is the ultimate prayer that we say when we are most in need of Jesus. Jesus, help me. And prayer is necessary for faith to continue to take root and grow. This, I think, is what we see in this third and final appearance of the young man. He has come to the tomb even before the women. He's gotten there. And it seems as though He knows what has happened. He perhaps was the first one that the risen Lord saw and spoke to. And he gives him that message to convey to others. This time we see that young man no longer in his rich young man's robes, no longer in that flimsy linen sheet that he had on in Gethsemane when he was just beginning to believe, but now robed in white. And it says, seated at the right hand where Christ was. That's where royalty sits in the Bible. That's where the greatest images of God are depicted, to sit at God's right hand. That's where this young man is. He's no longer sad because he has seen the risen Christ. He is no longer unclad, stripped of the garment that he had on in Gethsemane, for he wears the white garments of regenerated life, as will our elect and our confirmandi and our first communion candidates tonight. But now, not sad, not unglad, but filled with a message that is glad. He is not here. He has risen, as he said, and he will go before you into Galilee. My friends, we live in Galilee. Galilee was far from Jerusalem. We too are far from the center of our heavenly home. But Jesus goes before us tonight in each and every celebration of the Eucharist, because he comes to lead us through the struggles of this life, the doubts and darkness and insecurity, to bring us into the light of resurrection. What has changed the rich young man from sad to glad is the message of the risen Christ. And I think we can hear that message conveyed to us very beautifully in the recent words of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, speaking to a group of young people about faith. And it's almost as though he was speaking to the rich young man and about his trajectory from sad to glad and good news. And he says it to us on this night of the resurrection as well, because we too experience the resurrection when we do what Jesus told that rich young man. This is how the Pope puts it. True joy comes not from things or from possessing, no. It is born from the encounter, from the relationship with others. It is born from feeling accepted, understood, and loved, and from accepting, understanding, and from loving. This is not because of a passing fancy, but because the other is a person. Joy is born from the graciousness of an encounter. It is hearing someone say, with or without words, "You are important to me." And it is these very words that God makes us understand. In calling you, God says to you, "You are important to me. I love you. I am counting on you." Jesus says this to each one of us. Joy is born from that. The joy of the moment when Jesus looked at me, feeling loved by God, feeling that for him we are not numbers but people, and hearing him calling us. My friends, we experience the resurrection when we encounter in other people Jesus calling us. I can say with security that tonight, those we are about to baptize and confirm and give communion to have heard that call through their own loved ones, through their fiancés and spouses and their family members. Jesus has looked at them and said, "You are important to me. I love you. I am counting on you." Joy is born from that. The joy of the resurrection, the joy of the gospel, and tonight, on this Easter, this night of glory, we celebrate that in the baptism, the confirmation, and the Eucharist that we are about to celebrate.